circumcision of Abraham was for the purpose of having a child that Sarah desired and coveted for 90 years of her life. And when that child was taken on Mount Moriah to be offered as a sacrifice, and Sarah sensed this, she was shown this by her prophecy, her soul could not take this, and the soul left the body. That's how powerful the relationship between the mother and the child was. That the minute that there was a doubt as to whether the child would survive, the mother couldn't bear living. And this brings us to the relationship, the incredible relationship that God has placed in our bodies between ourselves and our children. That no matter how powerful the love that a father has for a child, and it is profound, it does not compare. It is infinitely smaller than the love that a mother has for her child, because she bore the child, nurtured the child, nursed the child, raised the child, brought the child up into a proper human being. And therefore the bond is far, far greater. That is why the Torah tells us to honor fathers before mothers, because by nature a man honors his mother more than his father, for that very reason, that the boy or the girl comes from the mother. There's no way around that. This goes directly to the premise that it's our bodies and we can do with it what we please and what we want. For you see, this is something that a human being does not choose. A human being does not choose to be human. A human being cannot turn on and off his or her intellect or his or her emotion. We are what we are. We have loves, we have fears, we have compassion, we have feelings and emotions, and we have natures. And it is the nature of a woman to nurture. And when a woman negates the nature to nurture, she destroys her essence, her being. There is an old principle. When a person goes to an extreme, they become very, very sick. And they don't realize that they've become very extreme. And then they begin to believe that sickness is health. For example, Maimonides says, there are people who learn to like to eat carbon, char. And when the person begins to eat char as a habit, the person gets sick, and then the person desires to eat char, even though this is poison for his system. And the person does not wish to eat that which is healthful and that which is good for his health. Because once the person has tipped the scale of balance of his own pH, of his own personal makeup, then the person begins to tip over to an extreme until the extreme will destroy him. That's what happens with drugs. A person has a natural balance. A person likes to have certain stimulus. And then a person lacks the stimulus, you take a drug for the stimulus. But once you have that stimulus and you need the stimulus, you become out of balance and you need it more and more till you become so sick that you can't live without it till you crash. The same thing is true when a person denies the love and the nurturing and the caring that a person has. And the person first starts off by denying that which is obvious, and then the person starts thinking that negating the obvious is good, and then the person becomes so out of whack that the person loses any sense of emotion, any sense of compassion, any sense of nurturing. The net result of abortion is cruelty, harshness, callousness to other people's suffering, and ultimately cruelty and destruction of life. I said this over 30 years ago when Roe v. Wade became law. I said that this would lead to a slippery slope of assisted suicide and ultimately doctor-assisted killing of people. Now, that's the reality in many places in this world. It's the reality in many hospitals. Because we've lost our compass, we've lost our balance, we've lost our sense of compassion for life, because we think it's our body, but the truth is it's not our body. We did not create our bodies. We have the right to use them as we choose, but it's not our bodies. We didn't make our bodies. And when you negate the very core and the very essence of what your body is all about, you negate your humanity, and ultimately you lose it. You become an animal that has no feelings and no compassion. It's interesting that the very same bodies that would have you not circumcise your children because of mutilation are also the same bodies that promote the destruction of human life, life that is viable. Oh yes, and if it's under rape and incest, there are ways of dealing with it. Before 40 days, according to Jewish law, the fetus is nothing. And even afterwards, for the first trimester, there are those who will allow an abortion under those circumstances. But once the child has gone to almost viable and then to viable, this becomes like a life on life support. Nobody in his right mind would take a human being that's capable of living off of his or her life support. The case of Terry Schiavo, that was a tragedy. I considered it murder, assisting in the murder. But in the case of Terry Schiavo, there was no hope for her. But here you have a person on life support that will become a living, breathing, compassionate, caring human being. Oh, but not going to be loved. Guess what? There's such a thing as adoption. It's not for you to choose. It's for you to choose to act whether you have sex or not. But not for the person to choose whether there should be a living entity in this world. That's God's choice. If you want to choose, choose before conception. After conception, accept the gift of God and accept your humanity and accept responsibility.